I once thought betrayal would announce itself, raised voices, slammed doors, chaos you couldn't miss. But when it came, it was so quiet it hollowed me out. My mother stood in a crowded courtroom, dabbing her eyes as she said, "We did everything we could for you, and you wasted it." My father didn't argue. He simply dipped his head in agreement. My brother fixed his gaze straight ahead, already tallying what he believed I was about to lose. My attorney remained composed, unervingly so. Then the judge paused mid-sentence. He lifted his eyes and mentioned he'd recognized my company's name from a news article just the week before. Before I get into how things reached that moment, tap like, comment, city, and share if you've ever been crossed by family. What surprises people most is that I didn't come from dysfunction. That's the part that never fits their expectations. From the outside, my family looked refined and secure, the kind neighbors admired and assumed had life figured out. My father ran a respected financial firm in Boston. He valued order, inheritance, and anything that followed a predictable path. My mother curated perfection, immaculate meals, polished smiles, emotions displayed only when they served a purpose. And then there was Marcus, my older brother. The successor. The one everyone assumed would inherit my father's world without question. I was the extra piece. Not a rebel, exactly. I didn't rebel loudly. I just never aligned. While Marcus talked investments and elite dinners, I obsessed over systems, how they failed, how they could be fortified, how threats hid in places people ignored. Once, at dinner, I tried to explain an idea, drawing diagrams on a napkin while the food cooled. My father watched briefly, then smiled the way adults do when indulging a child's fantasy. "It's just a phase," he said. "You'll grow out of it." My mother chuckled and smoothly redirected the conversation. Moments like that accumulated. Holidays where Marcus was praised for plans he hadn't even completed. Conversations that fell silent when I entered. Praise that always came tethered to a caveat. "You're intelligent, but you have potential, if only." When I left to build my own life, it wasn't explosive. There was no showdown, just space. I married James, took his name, and started building something deliberately, quietly, without announcing it to the people who once expected me to fail. And slowly, it succeeded. Not suddenly. Not effortlessly. There were years when everything I owned fit inside a tiny apartment and my business lived on a laptop perched on a flimsy table. Late nights. Missed celebrations. Lukewarm coffee. I learned endurance. I learned how to keep moving forward without validation. What I didn't learn was how to tell my family. I let their assumptions stand. When Marcus joked that I was still finding my footing, I didn't correct him. When my mother asked, with syrupy concern, whether I was managing financially, I said I was fine and changed the subject. Keeping things vague felt like protection, like shutting a window before a storm hit. For a long time, silence kept me safe. I didn't realize it was also giving them time to decide what they believed I was entitled to. By the time they realized I'd built something real, something valuable, they weren't proud. They were uneasy. My success didn't arrive with headlines or celebration. It showed up quietly. Contracts renewed without negotiation. Clients stopped asking if and started asking when. A growing team that trusted me with their livelihoods. I learned that the less my family knew, the smoother my life became. So I stayed out of the spotlight. I avoided sharing anything that hinted at growth or scale. When my mother asked vaguely what I did for work, I answered just as vaguely. Tech consulting. Busy. Nothing worth probing. For a while, that worked. Then Marcus started reaching out. At first, it was indirect, comments in group chats, casual remarks during holidays. Heard tech's unstable lately. Must be nerve-wracking without security. Always phrased as concern. Always delivered with a smile. My father joined in, too. Not asking about me, but about risk. Exposure. Whether people like me truly understood consequences. I sensed the shift before I could name it. The attention sharpened. My mother suddenly wanted updates. She suggested I visit more, reconnect, maybe even explore opportunities with my father. That word settled heavily in my gut. It wasn't an offer. It was an evaluation. Then came the dinner. Nothing erupted. No raised voices. Just Marcus making a casual remark about hearing I'd finally landed something respectable. He said it jokingly, but his eyes searched my face, measuring, calculating how much he'd missed. I deflected. That night, I told James something felt off. He didn't dismiss it. He recognized the pattern, the way curiosity becomes entitlement when certain people realize you might have something they never sanctioned you to earn. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Heavy. Formal. My name printed too neatly on the front. I stood frozen in the hallway, keys still in my hand, staring at it like it might change if I ignored it. When I opened it, the meaning didn't hit all at once. It came in waves. Bankruptcy. Filing. Creditor. Balance due, neatly calculated, unwavering, exact. Marcus's name appeared as if it had every right to be there. I read the document once. Then again. Then a third time. My hands stayed steady. My breathing didn't falter. What settled over me wasn't panic, it was something sharper, colder. They weren't probing anymore. A verdict had already been reached, and now they were dragging me into court to justify it. When I finished the paperwork, I didn't cry. I sat at the kitchen table and went through it again, deliberately this time. Line by line. Figure by figure. Each confident falsehood dressed up in formal language. They alleged my company owed Marcus nearly $2 million, missed payments, unpaid invoices, contracts I had supposedly signed years earlier. There was no outrage in the writing. That absence of emotion was what terrified me. The language was clinical, procedural, written to feel unavoidable. This wasn't intimidation. It was a blueprint. I called my attorney and read her the filing. She listened without interruption. When I stopped, the silence on the line lasted just long enough to make my stomach drop. "They're initiating bankruptcy pressure," she said calmly. "Not because the claim will stand, but because it creates confusion, delay, suspicion." "So they know it's false," I said. "Yes. And they expect you to panic instead of respond intelligently." That was when the realization hit. This wasn't Marcus lashing out on impulse. It required planning. Coordination. Consent. Someone had reviewed this and approved it. I thought of my mother's practiced restraint. My father's belief that control always looked like discipline. The way they unified whenever their narrative was threatened. I didn't need to ask if they were involved. I already understood. The following days blurred together. I gathered records, audits, ledgers, bank histories. Every clean trail I'd maintained over the years suddenly became critical. My attorney asked for everything, unhurried, unshaken. She wasn't concerned. That calm became my footing. "This only works if we let it," she told me. "Facts endure pressure." I didn't contact my family. Not to argue. Not to warn. Silence had stopped being self-defense. It was leverage. If they wanted to portray me as careless, I would arrive disciplined. If they wanted disorder, I would counter with precision. Late at night, when the house was still, anger tried to surface, not explosive rage, but the kind that asks dangerous questions. How could they do this? Why was I never enough? I pushed it aside. This was no longer about disproving them. It was about letting their actions dismantle themselves. And that unraveling would begin in a courtroom. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. A weight settled in my chest, where every sound echoed too loudly and every movement felt observed. I arrived early. Not to make a point, just to steady myself before everything converged. My attorney took the seat beside me, already arranged, already prepared. Stacks of organized evidence, payments, invoices, audit trails. Calm, embodied. She didn't ask how I felt. She recognized this silence. Then my family entered. Not together. They never were when it mattered. My mother came in first, dressed in black as if mourning. Marcus followed, relaxed, self-assured, already greeting his lawyer. My father entered last, back straight, eyes fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge me. None of them spoke to me. That cut deeper than I expected, not because I wanted reassurance, but because it sealed something irreversible. This wasn't confusion. It was consensus. Marcus's attorney opened the hearing. His voice was polished, rehearsed. He described my company as unstable, overleveraged, mismanaged. He spoke of obligations and liabilities. Of my supposed avoidance. Of the need to shield creditors. Right on cue, my mother began to cry, softly, just enough to register. She dabbed her eyes, shaking her head as though this hurt her deeply. When she addressed the court, her voice fractured flawlessly. "We gave her every chance," she said. "And she wasted it." My throat tightened, not from shock, but from the certainty in her tone. She spoke as if this were already accepted truth. My father nodded beside her, once. Measured. Controlled. That single gesture landed harder than her words. Marcus never glanced my way. He stared forward, hands folded, already envisioning his victory. In his story, this courtroom confirmed he'd been right all along. My lawyer remained still. No objections. No interruptions. She waited. The judge reviewed the filings in silence. Page after page. The room held its breath. The faint buzz of the lights overhead. The scrape of a chair somewhere behind me. Then something changed. The judge stopped turning pages. He removed his glasses and set them aside with deliberate care. He leaned back and looked up, not at the attorneys. Not at the paperwork. At me. The silence stretched. My heartbeat roared in my ears. "Counsel, approach the bench," he said. Both lawyers rose. Marcus's attorney started forward confidently. Halfway there, his shoulders stiffened. My attorney walked exactly as she always did, measured, composed, unhurried. Their conversation was hushed. I couldn't catch a single word, but I watched the color fade from Marcus's attorney's face. His jaw locked. He nodded too fast, like someone conceding ground he hadn't planned to lose. When they returned to their seats, the judge left his glasses on the bench. "I have a question," he said evenly, his voice carrying through the courtroom. "Regarding the company named in this filing." Marcus finally lifted his head. "I came across this company recently," the judge continued. "Not through court records, through the press." My mother's sob caught in her throat. Marcus glanced sharply at his lawyer. "A technology firm," the judge said, unhurried, expanding quickly, delivering services that attracted national notice. He paused. "Is that familiar to you, Mr. Whitmore?" Marcus stood abruptly. "Your Honor, the respondent is inflating her achievements. This business is minor." "I wasn't finished," the judge said, stopping him without raising his voice. The atmosphere shifted. Alert. Electric. "I'm reviewing independently audited financial statements," the judge said, lifting a page. "They show steady growth, strong cash reserves, and no evidence of financial distress." He turned another sheet. "I'm also reviewing transaction records that contradict the liabilities claimed in this petition." Marcus's lawyer adjusted in his chair. "And there's more," the judge added, holding up another document. "A professional signature comparison." His eyes fixed on Marcus. "These signatures do not belong to the defendant." The room felt airless. My father leaned forward slightly, as if trying to make sense of what he was hearing. My mother's hands went still in her lap. My attorney rose. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "we are prepared to detail each discrepancy. The payments cited do not exist. The invoices referenced were never issued. And the alleged loan corresponds to a period when the petitioner's own financial records indicate instability." She let the silence work. In addition, initiating legal action against an active business through falsified claims carries serious consequences. Marcus sprang to his feet. "This is absurd. She's manipulating facts to shield herself." The judge didn't look at him. "What troubles me," he said calmly, "is not her explanation, but your confidence." He turned page after page. "One individual in this courtroom," he said slowly, "is being untruthful to this court." I felt my chest loosen, just a little. "And based on the evidence before me," he continued, "it is not the defendant." My mother's eyes darted to my father. He didn't return the look. Marcus opened his mouth, then thought better of it. "This petition is dismissed," the judge said, "with prejudice." He paused, then added, "This matter will be forwarded for further examination." My attorney placed her hand on the table, not on me. She didn't need to. The outcome was already clear. Court officers approached Marcus and his counsel. Their voices were low. Their expressions were not. My family seemed to shrink in place, folding inward. As we stood to leave, my mother reached for my arm. "Alexis," she whispered, panic breaking through her composure. "We were only trying to help." I looked at her hand, then met her eyes. "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to be right." I turned away before she could answer. Behind me, I heard my father say my name. I didn't turn back. The doors closed behind me with a sound that felt absolute. For the first time since this started, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was leaving it behind. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They rarely do. They moved silently, the way accountability tends to move when there's no one left protecting it. Marcus stopped calling. Then his attorney did too. I didn't get details firsthand, only fragments from conversations I no longer belonged to. Reviews. Inquiries. Reconsiderations. The vocabulary of people who had lost their certainty. My parents tried again, differently. A voicemail from my mother, soft, measured, saying no one expected things to spiral. A message from my father that sounded less like remorse and more like a formal statement. He spoke of family, of image, of how errors shouldn't define a person forever. I didn't respond, not out of bitterness, but understanding. What they made wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. And decisions don't disappear just because the result is inconvenient. Work continued. Meetings resumed. Deadlines reclaimed their importance. My team showed up as they always had, focused, reliable, trusting me without needing explanations. That trust grounded me more than any ruling ever could. At home, life softened. Evenings grew quieter. The tension I'd carried for years finally loosened. I slept deeper. Thought clearer. For the first time in a long time, my success didn't feel like something I had to justify. I didn't win by watching them collapse. I won by standing still while the truth did what it always does. It endured. I learned something I wish I'd understood sooner. Family isn't defined by shared blood or last names. It's defined by who stands with you when honesty becomes uncomfortable. Some people only love you when you're small enough to manage. When you outgrow that, they call it betrayal. If any of this felt familiar, you're not alone. Share your thoughts below. Let me know where you're listening from. And if you want more real-life family stories like this, be sure to subscribe.